Ford and Ferrari with Matt Damon and Christian Bale in it. First off, I'll get straight to my rating of it, and I'm going to give this a rating of about 8.5 out of 10.
Coldstream.
Great film. If you're thinking about watching it, watch it. Great film, true story, really well put together. Great performances. Just how it's all cinematically put together as well, just the techniques used. The capturing of that era, everything is done beautifully. Even the way they actually film the Le Mans 24-hour race is actually really nicely filmed. It gives you a real sense of how things were to do that race back in them days. Because you've got to think about things like the lack of technology, the lack of health and safety and things, or at least the different health and safety and things back in them days compared to now. So it's very well put together, really nice looking, and I'd recommend watching it. So that's the first thing. Before we do any spoilers or anything like that, I strongly recommend you watch it. Okay, really good film. It's quite a long film, granted, but with long films, what matters is pace. Okay, so the pace of the story, the narrative, the editing, of course, all of that needs to be done really well. It needs to have a constant, quite speedy pace to it. Things have got to keep happening, and they've got to be quite easy to understand as well. And this ticks them boxes. A bit like Oppenheimer in that sense, which is a very long film. But at the same time, there's so much happening that you don't actually feel. It doesn't feel like it's such a long film actually. So that's what it's about. So that being said, if you are going to watch it, I'd recommend stopping here and go away and watch it. Okay, so that's first things first. If you're going to watch it, stop it here, go away and watch it. Okay. Because now, spoiler alert, I'm going to actually start discussing the film itself. Okay. So, of course, it's a true story. Spoiler alert, that's the last one you're getting. And in my perspective, what a tragedy. What an absolute tragedy. Because that's what this film really is. It's a tragedy film. And it's about Ken Miles, who I had no idea about, but it turns out he is some kind of legendary racer. And one of those who is, what's the opposite of a people person? Whatever that is. The opposite of a people person, that's who Ken Miles is. And at the same time, he is an absolute legendary race driver. I think in this film, he does a NASCAR race or a NASCAR type race where they basically go around in circles, which I don't know why American people love that, but there must be some kind of technical prowess or technique involved, but they just keep going around in circles and somehow somebody wins. Don't get it. But anyway, he wins that race, and I think he wins other races too. So this is a driver who can win in massively different types of races. So that's magnificent in itself. Then, on another level, he's able to repair cars, and it looks like in this film, a big part of his income was him being some kind of like sports car, luxury car mechanic. That's one thing. And then outside of that, he was able to develop a car as well. So he was a massive part when it came to developing the Ford GT40. And I didn't know that Shelby was like a company in itself. I thought that like Ford Shelby was a thing. I'm sure it is, isn't it? That there's a Shelby Mustang. Isn't that a Ford Mustang? I'm sure there's a crossover with Ford and Shelby somewhere. That part was brilliant in the film where Shelby is trying to get... Oh, and by the way, in this film, Shelby, Matt Damon, was, I think, one of the people who had either won or completed Le Mans, the 24-hour race. And so Ken Miles, of course, that character, played by Christian Bale, he goes to Shelby, Matt Damon, for advice on like doing the Le Mans race. So there was that really good cooperation between them, and in fact it appeared that they already had a relationship in terms of racing. I think that Ken Miles was racing for Shelby already, so that comes across in the story. So they had known each other for a good while, and I think it may well just be chance that Shelby, who had already completed the Le Mans 24-hour race, was now in touch with legendary racer Ken Miles, who was then about to go ahead and do the Le Mans 24-hour race as well, and of course, as we know, come through to win it. And we will say he won it, even though on paper it's going to come down as he didn't, but we will say he won it because for me, if we're going off that film, that's the right thing to say, and he deserves that legendary status of being the winner of that race, the man who beat Ferrari. So yeah, we'll be saying that in this. I was going somewhere else before I turned off on this tangent, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to find where that was. Yes. Anyway, it was amazing that Christian Bale's character Ken Miles was able to not only race cars so fast, but also repair them, but then also was able to develop the car that beat Ferrari. Now that is amazing. That is absolutely mind-blowing. One thing about the race, which was won by Ken Miles, the Ferrari cars, I don't think they actually finished. They were more of a DNF. There were things that happened in the race, like I'm sure a couple of them crashed, one of them broke down, something like that. But they were basically a DNF. But even in that situation, Ken Miles was like racing at such a speed that he was able to take back laps of progress. So Ferrari was like a lap ahead, lap and a half ahead, maybe 2 laps ahead at some point, I don't know. But definitely at least like a lap and a half. And Ken Miles was racing at such a speed that he was able to pull back that lead. Can you imagine how fast he must have been going to have pulled back a lead of more than a lap? That's like lightning fast. As mentioned in the actual film, he's doing perfect laps, and he's showing that he can do perfect laps. I'm pretty sure he was breaking records in that race. So he's proven himself as a legendary racer in many ways just in that one race. Crazy. Oh, this is where I was going to go, and I've come back to it. That bit was amazing, where Shelby really, really wants Ken Miles to race this race for Ford. Or at least Shelby wants Ken Miles on his team. And Ford is saying, we don't want him. He's not a people's person. He's not right for the image of the company. We don't want to use Ken Miles. Okay, fair enough. Now, Shelby's not having it because Ken Miles is already out there training for this race, getting himself like blown up, which is what happens in the film. He basically gets himself blown up. Lucky for him, the stuff is fireproof. But he's out there busting himself to get this race won. And then there's Ford saying, no, we don't want him. And I find that mental. But anyway, then Shelby says, let him race NASCAR. And if he doesn't come first, you can have my company. Imagine that. Imagine that. He's put his company on a race. He's put his company on Ken Miles winning that race. And then he goes, but if Ken Miles wins the race, then he gets to race the Le Mans 24 hours for you. That's the deal. And Ford, being a businessman, he takes it. Bear in mind, this is not the Ford. This is his grandson, who is trying to live in these massive shoes that the original Ford left behind. So really, it is interesting that he actually won this race. Now, we're going to skip ahead straight to one of the most tragic parts of this film. And that is where the race has happened now. They've done the whole 24 hours. Like they're literally on the last lap of this, last 2 or 3 laps of this race. And it's now basically guaranteed that Ford are going to win, okay? Because the Ferrari cars are now out of the race. So Ford is going to win. They've got it in the bag, all right? That's happening. Now, Matt Damon goes over to Christian Bale and says, the Ford man wants you to slow down, which is mad to say to a racer, slow down in a race when you're in pole position. Mental. When you've trained for like years for this. So he's being told to slow down, first thing, yeah. Second thing is, we want the Fords, the 3 Ford cars that are in this race, we want them to all cross the line at the same time. It'll be a historic moment for Ford. It'll be great for the media, all the rest of it. And Ken Miles, of course, doesn't take it very well, rightly so. He then proceeds to break records on the following laps to just show how amazing he is, and I love that he did that. Then he basically stops the car. It's like, fine, this is the one time I will be a people's person. I'm going to do this for you. And I'll go ahead and let's slow down. Let's all cross at the same time. And you can have your cake and eat it, Mr. Ford. All right. This is heartbreaking, to be honest with you. So they all slow down. The 3 Fords cross the line at the same time. Okay. And I'm sure that on the actual line, they'll let Ken Miles go over the line first. But he doesn't win. So people are all rushing over to this other driver who is basically in first place. Now, why didn't Ken Miles win, even though he still crossed the line first? Basically, the technicality was this. The other driver, when you look at the starting grid of the cars, the other driver was further back on the starting grid. Okay, so if he's further back, and him and Ken Miles crossed the line at the same time, the guy who was further back has actually travelled further in that race. And if he's travelled further, but you've both got there at the same time, he's actually faster because he's covered more ground in the same time as you, basically. But because that's more ground, that's faster. So that's why he wins. Although they both crossed the line at the same time, he covered more ground because he was further back on the grid. He wins the race. Heartbreaking. Absolutely crazy. At that point, it would have been perfect, really, if Ken Miles had stopped racing. Because his wife wanted him to stop. That comes up in the film. He had retired. All right. So he should have stopped. That's the thing. Now, next thing is he doesn't stop. And it looks like they were going for another attempt at this next time round. Yeah, like a year later or something. But unfortunately, in that time, there's a brake failure or a failure with the car while they were testing it, practicing, and Ken Miles passes away. And how they put it officially on paper and stuff, yeah, he didn't win that race, but he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. So there is still that. He's still got that recognition, which he deserves, because his performance was absolutely legendary. To break records in that race, magnificent. Everything is proven, everything is recorded, and Ken Miles absolutely smashed it. It's a great film. It's emotive. The performances are brilliant. It's very well put together. It looks like it took a long time to make. A lot of effort has gone into that film. Strongly recommend it. Really good film. I think that's basically everything covered. Again, the era is very well captured, and the feel of it is very well captured. His relationship with his son is interesting. But yeah, we'll leave that there. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one.